The two lime merchants, with their escort, entered the dominions of Miss Abby Potterson, to whom their escort, presenting them and their pretended business over the half-door of the bar, in a confidential way, preferred his figurative request that a mouthful of fire might be lighted in cozy. Always well disposed to assist the constituted authorities, Miss Abby bade Bob Glittery attend the gentleman to that retreat, and promptly enliven it with fire and gaslight. Of this commission the bare-armed Bob, leading the way with a flaming wisp of paper, so speedily acquitted himself, that Cozy seemed to leap out of a dark sleep and embrace them warmly, the moment they passed the lintels of its hospitable door. "They burn sherry very well here," said Mr. Inspector, as a piece of local intelligence. "Perhaps you gentlemen might like a bottle?" The answer being by all means, Bob Glittery received his instructions from Mr. Inspector, and departed in a becoming state of alacrity engendered by reverence for the majesty of the law. "It's a certain fact," said Mr. Inspector, "that this man we have received our information from, indicating writerhood with his thumb over his shoulder, has for some time past given the other man a bad name arising out of your lime barges, and that the other man has been avoided in consequence. I don't say what it means or proves, but it's a certain fact. I had it first from one of the opposite sex of my acquaintance, vaguely indicating Miss Abby with his thumb over his shoulder, down away at a distance, over yonder." "Then probably Mr. Inspector was not quite unprepared for their visit that evening?" Lightwood hinted. "Well, you see," said Mr. Inspector, "it was a question of making a move." "It's of no use moving if you don't know what your move is. You had better by far keep still. In the matter of this lime, I certainly had an idea that it might lie betwixt the two men. I always had that idea. Still I was forced to wait for a start, and I wasn't so lucky as to get a start. This man that we have received our information from, has got a start, and if he don't meet with a check he may make the running and come in first. There may turn out to be something considerable for him that comes in second, and I don't mention who may or who may not try for that place. There's duty to do, and I shall do it, under any circumstances, to the best of my judgment and ability." "Speaking as a shipper of lime," began Eugene. "Which no man has a better right to do than yourself, you know," said Mr. Inspector. "I hope not," said Eugene, "my father having been a shipper of lime before me, and my grandfather before him, in fact we having been a family immersed to the crowns of our heads in lime during several generations. I beg to observe that if this missing lime could be got hold of without any young female relative of any distinguished gentleman engaged in the lime trade, which I cherish next to my life, being present, I think it might be a more agreeable proceeding to the assisting bystanders, that is to say, lime burners." "I also," said Lightwood, pushing his friend aside with a laugh, "should much prefer that." "It shall be done, gentlemen, if it can be done conveniently," said Mr. Inspector, with coolness. "There is no wish on my part to cause any distress in that quarter. Indeed, I am sorry for that quarter." "There was a boy in that quarter," remarked Eugene. "He is still there?" "No," said Mr. Inspector. "He has quitted those works. He is otherwise disposed of." "Will she be left alone then?" asked Eugene. "She will be left," said Mr. Inspector, "alone." Bob's reappearance with a steaming jug broke off the conversation. But although the jug steamed forth a delicious perfume, its contents had not received that last happy touch which the surpassing finish of the 6 jolly fellowship porters imparted on such momentous occasions. Bob carried in his left hand one of those iron models of sugar-loaf hats, before mentioned, into which he emptied the jug, and the pointed end of which he thrust deep down into the fire, so leaving it for a few moments while he disappeared and reappeared with 3 bright drinking glasses. Placing these on the table and bending over the fire, meritoriously sensible of the trying nature of his duty, he watched the wreaths of steam, until at the special instant of projection he caught up the iron vessel and gave it one delicate twirl, causing it to send forth one gentle hiss. Then he restored the contents to the jug, held over the steam of the jug each of the 3 bright glasses in succession, finally filled them all, and with a clear conscience awaited the applause of his fellow creatures. It was bestowed, Mr. Inspector having proposed as an appropriate sentiment the lime trade, and Bob withdrew to report the commendations of the guests to Miss Abby in the bar. It may be here in confidence admitted that, the room being close shut in his absence, there had not appeared to be the slightest reason for the elaborate maintenance of this same line fiction. Only it had been regarded by Mr. Inspector as so uncommonly satisfactory, and so fraught with mysterious virtues, that neither of his clients had presumed to question it. 2 taps were now heard on the outside of the window. Mr. Inspector, hastily fortifying himself with another glass, strolled out with a noiseless foot and an unoccupied countenance, as one might go to survey the weather and the general aspect of the heavenly bodies. "This is becoming grim, Mortimer," said Eugene, in a low voice. "I don't like this." "Nor I," said Lightwood. "Shall we go?" "Being here, let us stay. You ought to see it out, and I won't leave you. Besides, that lonely girl with the dark hair runs in my head. It was little more than a glimpse we had of her that last time, and yet I almost see her waiting by the fire tonight. Do you feel like a dark combination of traitor and pickpocket when you think of that girl?" "Rather," returned Lightwood. "Do you?" "Very much so." Their escort strolled back again, and reported. Divested of its various limelights and shadows, his report went to the effect that Gaffer was away in his boat, supposed to be on his old lookout, that he had been expected last high water, that having missed it for some reason or other, he was not, according to his usual habits at night, to be counted on before next high water, or it might be an hour or so later, that his daughter, surveyed through the window, would seem to be so expecting him, for the supper was not cooking, but set out, ready to be cooked, that it would be high water at about 1, and that it was now barely 10, that there was nothing to be done but watch and wait, that the informer was keeping watch at the instant of that present reporting, but that 2 heads were better than 1, especially when the second was Mr. Inspector's, and that the reporter meant to share the watch. And forasmuch as crouching under the lee of a hauled-up boat on a night when it blew cold and strong, and when the weather was varied with blasts of hail at times, might be wearisome to amateurs, the reporter closed with the recommendation that the 2 gentlemen should remain, for a while at any rate, in their present quarters, which were weathertight and warm. They were not inclined to dispute this recommendation, but they wanted to know where they could join the watchers when so disposed. Rather than trust to a verbal description of the place, which might mislead, Eugene, with a less weighty sense of personal trouble on him than he usually had, would go out with Mr. Inspector, note the spot, and come back. On the shelving bank of the river, among the slimy stones of a causeway, not the special causeway of the 6 Jolly Fellowships, which had a landing place of its own, but another, a little removed, and very near to the old windmill which was the denounced man's dwelling place, were a few boats, some moored and already beginning to float, others hauled up above the reach of the tide. Under one of these latter, Eugene's companion disappeared. And when Eugene had observed its position with reference to the other boats, and had made sure that he could not miss it, he turned his eyes upon the building where, as he had been told, the lonely girl with the dark hair sat by the fire.